Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today. This is your host Nino, inviting you to an episode in which we shall explore this Cyberdeck of sorts, which I have prepared for the upcoming Vienna's Daughters' Days, an event in which companies shall introduce young girls, teens, and preteens to tinkering with technology in order to foster the entry of more talent into such fields. And what I have always been fascinated with, and which is this year's contribution of Q branch, if you will, are hardcopy terminals like the ESP32 controlling Unix or IBM Selectrix connected to IBM mainframes. I love this idea. And I have created something around this brother EP-22 typewriter, as well as an old Android tablet, which together constitute a device that does not exactly work that way, but works that way in a sort of science fiction-ish fashion, in that you type on the tablet and the output shall be presented on the typewriter. So let's perhaps start our attention with the typewriter itself. So this is a very beautiful machine design-wise and very interesting insofar as it is offering a DB25-pin RS232 port on its left side. So it has a serial port here, one of the big old ones, female. And this serial port does allow to receive information and print it on the typewriter. However, it does not allow to type from the typewriter and send their information out. There have been efforts in the past with similar machines which have been intercepting chip signals inside and have been able to turn similar machines into true input and output terminals, but I wanted something easy and non-invasive, so I came up with a different scheme. I am connecting the typewriter over an ESP32 board so that it shall receive information to print from an old Android tablet. But the entire setup is made that way that you do not really see the result of what you type on the tablet, and instead you see it on the typewriter. And that way, these two together form the Cyberdeck. You type here and it comes out here. This is accomplished via an ESP32 board. So we're having here an AZ delivery D1R32, which is really a clone of the Wemos D1R32 and can be handled as such in Arduino. I created a simple sketch which is working that way that whatever is received on the serial line is turned into a network transmission, and whatever network transmission is received is sent over to the serial line. In this case, this is just unidirectional, as the typewriter cannot actually send anything to it to display anywhere else, but we can contact that chip, like that board, wirelessly and send things towards it. Just things have to look properly. And this is where this old Android tablet comes into play. I believe the entire adventure may have been easier actually with Termux, but as this is an Android 4 device, there is no Termux. What I do have at my disposal, however, is something called LinuxDeploy and ConnectBot. I managed to root this Archos 101 Neon tablet with Kingo root. Just install the APK, trigger the process, it handles everything itself, just very smooth. And having rooted it, I was able to put on it Debian via LinuxDeploy. So this is really such a very user-friendly application where it's just like button press install, and once you have installed your distribution, you just simply type start and then type OK, and then you see that's all it does. Debian has started. Very good. Now, before we really connect to it, we have to pay attention that our intended output device is configured for proper output. It has only the speed of maximum 300 baud, which is incidentally also the lowest standardized one, so don't bother looking for anything faster. There's no 9600 speed or anything like that. Pay attention that you have set it to printer rather than to normal. And once you have started it, you need to press Cont for it to really go online. Otherwise, if you say stop, and this is the default start, it works as a printer but is not on. So you press here this, and then, yeah, it replies with, hey, I'm ready, give me something to print. Now, this tablet is connected to this ESP32 board, which is serving as a server. And this server is expecting to be contacted in its IP address at a port. And once that happens, the network to serial connection is indeed established. To do so on the tablet, I am using an application called ConnectBot. Good old ConnectBot, one of the first most serious terminal applications on Android, is having here a pre-prepared connection by me called basic on brother EP-22. For that is what I will be running on that typewriter. I'll be running BW Basic, which is sort of a recreation of GWiz Basic from the 1980s. Now, if we just briefly look at its setup, you will also see immediately what I have done with the keyboard here. I have given this keyboard an absurd amount of screen share, so that all you see is sort of the uppermost line where you can correct your typing, but your entire interactions, in order to be sensibly perceived, are to be examined on the typewriter. So that is how I sort of force the typewriter to be the screen, if you will. Now, if I make the keyboard disappear for a second, just to show you what I'm doing, I am connecting to LinuxDeploy on localhost on its port 5023. This is where it's offering a telnet connection, so I can connect there with a client. I'm doing that. And in the end, I am triggering a couple of commands which then are automatically executed once connected. The first one is to start a shell for LinuxDeploy, so get me into Debian. And give it a little bit of a break so that this whole getting into Debian process completes successfully. And finally, trigger the basic interpreter. And trigger it in such a way, this is where it's silent, that I only see on the tablet what I type in the last line. But what is the output to what I type, together with what I type, is shown only on the typewriter. In practice, this looks like this. So I'm tapping it to start it up. And there we are. It has started up. And you can see that the Bywater basic interpreter shell is already seen as starting up here on the brother EP-22. I'm not sure, can't I perhaps pull this just a little bit this way and maybe clap this open so that we can see the printhead a little more directly. Very good. And now I could, for instance, write a basic program, and as you can see, it really works like a correction line on old electric typewriters. It's not really working as a screen, and so my tablet is really the keyboard. So if I say 10 print hello, enter, then that is accepted and we're prompted again for interaction. But this prompt, where BW basic tells ready for the next command, is only shown on the typewriter. It's not actually shown on the tablet. So it's not like you can ignore the typewriter and just work on the tablet. You can't. You're forced to use the tablet merely as a keyboard. Now let me just insert a little loop where we will compute square numbers, for instance. So 20, 24. What does it do there? Uh-oh. Okay. I'm having some electrical instability and this just happened. I'm not 100% sure why it does that. But basically, the brother EP-22 seems to be somehow interfering with the electrical stability of this little chip here, which I will now reset. And it sometimes simply spontaneously restarts. So this is not perfect yet. But let me set up things to return to where we were. All right, it looks like the whole thing was perhaps due to an empty battery. I'll say a word about this in a second too. But anyway, I managed now to make my program. So if I say here list and press enter, then we're seeing my command list as well as the basic program that shall simply print out the square numbers from 1 to 10. And if I say now run, fundamentally this works. Very good. And now I could, do whatever one does. I can say print hello. And that should really give children an idea of what it sort of felt like using an ancient computer. So that is as much as the usage goes, and perhaps we can enter now into one or the other technical detail in case you wish to recreate this whole thing. So, issue number 1, I'm having clearly electrical issues. The typewriter very nicely supports being fed over a USB battery. So essentially I have just channeled such a USB connection over there to its jack, to its DC jack, and while it is expecting 6 volts, it is working with 5 volts just nicely. And in reality, these things really connect this jack to the inside battery connector, where it again expects 4 1.5 volt batteries, which again gives you 6 volt, but 1.5 volt batteries normally very quickly drop voltage to around 1.2 volts, so really it is expecting 5 volt, and you're just fine feeding such devices with a USB battery. The other branch or USB connector of this battery is feeding the old tablet, which being antique doesn't really have any significant battery life. And I wanted to feed also the microcontroller of a split from the connection to the typewriter, and that would work if I feed only the microcontroller, but not both it and the typewriter. Apparently, if both try to operate at the same time, this is drawing too much current or something, and anyway, this starts to lose power, brownouts, and is all the time like starting, stopping, starting, stopping, starting, stopping. So, despite my best efforts, in the end I had to power it over a 9 volt battery, but at least that's reliable. So that's the electrical issue. Then, of course, I'm sure you are curious as to how exactly we are outputting things here from this tablet. As you can see, it's only visible what we have typed, not really what the machine has executed, how this is going really over there in such a nice way that you see both the command and its result. And here you're seeing the two relevant commands doing that, like the two scripts bash silent sh as well as bash.sh, depending on what is more amenable to your taste. The one I'm using is bash silent, so you are removing any buffering. So key presses are sent immediately. This is standard buffer, like 0 space for the buffer. Then you're saying T is crucial. This is splitting your command. It's like cat standard input, but it is splitting it so that you're having both what you typed and how it has been executed by BW Basic. You could easily have here sh for the shell, and it works including with the ed editor, so you can really have something highly atmospheric here. And so T is sending both the command you typed and the basics result into netcat, which is going over to the ESP32 board, and then, in consequence, printing everything on the typewriter. If you should wish to not only see what you typed, but also what came out of it, then you have to use another T, for instance, to standard error, in order to also print out here, like on the tablet, what is BW Basics result. But I did not want to have that. I wanted that the entire interaction happens really over the typewriter, so I did not opt for it, but I just wanted to show it to you so that you see, if you wanted that the typewriter sort of mirrors the tablet, then the second command would be the more appropriate one. And that is what it would look like. So here I'm having it mirroring with the shell. And if I were to trigger that, okay, then I am now having the sh shell interpreter instead of BW Basic running there. I could also run BW Basic there, and I could say, for instance, date. So what date do I have? Pressing enter, date. April 13th. I could say VMstat. To look at my memory statistics. VMstat is being executed. Of course, if I wanted to, I could again run also BW Basic from the shell, but I thought, for little children, this would be perhaps a little bit overwhelming, and just being dumped straight into BASIC, as has been traditional at the time, may even not only be more authentic, but also easier to deal with. But you can, like if I say add new.txt, so I'm editing now a new file, and I see myself typing here on this narrow one line on the screen, and then typing enter. Then I'm seeing that I want to trigger the ed editor. Ed is greeting me. I can say append, so A, and I can say, hey there, the, not he, but the end, single dot to end editing, W to write. I had written something apparently before that. I see that there's an 18, so if I now cat it, there will be whatever I wrote before. I hope there is nothing indecent. That's why it's important to be a decent person. Oh, whoopsie, we're out of paper. Well, yeah, trust me, bro, Ed is working. So in essence, that way, one can use the tablet as a keyboard and the typewriter as a monitor. And with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope to greet you here soon again for further adventures. If not a subscriber yet, it would be awfully kind of you to consider joining our friendly club. Until we meet again, I'm wishing you a wonderful time, see you hopefully soon, and from me, goodbye.